Welcome to Strip Cover, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for the Weekly Reader, week 5 of the Weekly Reader. And it is May, and May 16th is the birthday of one Adrian Rich. Adrian Rich is the author / presenter, I believe. I think this was a speech of poetry and commitment, a text which I had considered presenting on the channel after the conclusion of What is Poetry. But when I went back, so the way I sort of tried to figure out what I'm going to do once in a while is that I will go back and I will read through the things that I'd highlighted and see what kind of show or series I could put together on it. And I realized when going back through this text, I really disagree with a lot of it. And with considering the contentious nature of the series that was What is Poetry by Robert Hall Wheelock? Robert Hall Wheelock? Was that what it is? I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But considering the contentious nature that series did, in fact, have, I didn't really want to jump right back into something that was going to be so persnickety. Before I get into this, look, on my personal channel, to which I will pin a comment in the comment section below, I'll pin a comment there so you can click on my pretty little face and follow me over to that channel. I'm going to get ready to start doing my 150 subscriber Ask Me Anything, but I think I'm going to do it as a series. I'm just going to start an Ask Adrian Anything series, because there were a lot of good questions, and I don't think I would be able to do justice to any of the questions if I put all of them into one video. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and start that and just sort of answer different questions as things come up. I've got a Michael Jackson Band-Aid today. Celebrate Adrian Rich. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but I cut my finger at work. This little pamphlet is one with which I was absolutely married at one point of time in how I conceptualize poetry, in my relationship to poetry, in the way that I thought of poetry. Not so much anymore, and I think it's because I have, let's just get into it. So this comes to us from page 21 through 23, which is chapter-ish, I don't know what part, chapter 5. I hope never to idealize poetry. It has suffered enough from that. I can get behind that. Poetry is not a healing lotion, an emotional massage, a kind of linguistic aromatherapy. I will agree with that. Neither is it a blueprint, nor an instruction manual, nor a billboard. There is no universal poetry anyway, only poetries and poetics, and the streaming, intertwining histories to which they belong. There is room, indeed necessity, for both Neruda and Cesar Vallejo, for Pier Paolo Pasolini and Alfonsini Storni, for Audre Lorde and Amy Césaire, for both Ezra Pound and Nellie Sachs. Poetries are no more pure and simple than human histories are pure and simple. We're on the same page so far. Poetry, like silk or coffee or oil or human flesh, I don't know why she wants to do all this or stuff. Make your point and move on. Anyway, poetry, like silk or coffee or oil or human flesh, has had its trade routes. Here we go. And there are colonized poetics, of course there are, and resilient poetics, of course there are, transmissions across frontiers not easily traced. All right. Walt Whitman never separated his poetry from his vision of American democracy, a vision severely tested in a civil war fought over the economics of slavery. Late in life, he called, quote, poetic lore A conversation overheard in the dusk from speakers far or hid, of which we get only a few broken murmurs in quote. The obscurity we might think now of democracy itself, but also of those, quote, dark times, end quote, in and about which Bertolt Brecht assured us there would be songs. Poetry has been charged with, quote, aestheticizing, end quote, thus being complicit in the violent realities of power, of practices like collective punishment, torture, rape, and genocide. This accusation was famously invoked in Adorno's, quote, after the Holocaust lyric poetry is impossible, end quote, which Adorno later retracted and which a succession of Jewish poets have in their practice rejected. I'm thinking now not only of post-World War II poets like Celan, Edmund Yabes, Nellie Sachs, Katia Molodowsky, Muriel Rukeyser, Irina Klepfitz. I'm also thinking of contemporary poems in a recent collection from Israel that I've been reading in translation, with an iron pen, Hebrew protest poetry, 1980 to 2004, ignited by the atrocious policies and practices of Israelis' occupation of Palestine. This entire pamphlet, basically, in my eyes now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm overreacting, is a justification. Well, basically, what happened in those couple pages was, hey, I hope I never idealize poetry. So here, let me tell you exactly what poetry is to do. In the same breathtaking couple pages, Rich goes from saying there is room in poetry for everything to basically saying this is what poetry should have beneath it, behind it, beside it. And on 33 here, I'd like to suggest this. If there's a line to be drawn, it's not so much between secularism and belief as between those for whom language has metaphoric density and those for whom it is merely formulaic. To be used for repression, manipulation, empty certitudes, to ensure obedience. And such a line can also be drawn between ideologically obedient hack verse and an engaged poetics that endures the weight of the unknown, the untracked, the unrealized, along with its urgencies for and against. Here's the problem I'm going to have with that. When you condemn one type of poetry as ideologically obedient hack verse, and you, in the same very sentence, suggest and praise other poetry as engaged poetics, all you're doing is picking one side of the fence. That's all you're doing. All you're doing is saying, your politics should not be in poetry, but mine, well, I think they should be. In fact, I think that's what poetry should be. Poetry should be my politics. And there's room for other voices, there's room for other streams of thought, but those, politics, not so much. I am at a place where I really don't care for anyone's politics. Anyone's politics. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. I don't care. You want to write a poem about it? Fine. Saddle up and write one. Just make it good. But for me, what poetry is really about is independent struggle. Because if you want to break politics down, and you want to bring in all kinds of politics. And let's pretend, because this is the main topic of the day on the internet, on the Twitter, on the YouTube, identity politics. The number one minority is the individual. The world's largest or smallest, however you want to look at things, minority, the most important minority without which nothing can be accomplished, is the individual. We see what happens in the world when the individual as minority is disregarded. We see what happens in those regimes. I don't think I need to be the one that reminds anyone. So the poetry of the individual and the individual's struggle is immediately political. It is political. It is the politicization of the individual. What other politicization needs to occur? All of those other boundaries break down at the level of the individual. If we stand up for one another as individuals, all the other lines are meaningless because the individual has rights. That's why, for me, political, quote-unquote, poetry, I don't really care about it. I don't really care. It doesn't mean anything to me. Write about what you're going to write about. And if it's... What you're doing is... There's that phrase, in every myth there is a kernel of truth. That kernel of truth is what makes the myth live forever. That kernel of truth is normally centered around an individual. This is the hero's journey. This is the myth of the flood myth, by which an individual family survives. That's where that kernel is, right? That's where the kernel becomes important. That is the seminal kernel. What you're doing when, in my opinion, hey, I might be full of shit. In fact, probably I am. What you're doing when you jump straight to a type of politicization, I can't speak, I can't stand these words. When you jump straight to the political realm, you're forgoing that kernel entirely. You want the you want the tapestry, but not the painting. I think that's what I'm going for here. But so, for me, the best poetry comes down to an individual struggle. That's why I will always defend Charles Bukowski. Melancholia, from page 340 in The Pleasures of the Damned. Melancholia. The history of melancholia includes all of us. Me, I writhe in dirty sheets while staring at blue walls and nothing. I have gotten so used to melancholia that I greet it like an old friend. I will now do 15 minutes of grieving for the lost redhead, I tell the gods. I do it and I feel quite bad, quite sad. Then I rise cleansed, even though nothing is solved. That's what I get for kicking religion in the ass. I should have kicked the redhead in the ass where her brains and her bread and butter are at. But no, I felt sad about everything. The lost redhead was just another smash and a lifelong loss. I listen to drums on the radio show now and grin. There is something wrong with me besides melancholia. What are we doing here? We address identity politics. We address religion. We address socio-norms. All of these things we address in this poem. And what are we doing with them? We're just exemplifying them with the individual. What we're doing is we're putting on display Bukowski, the flawed man. And he's a rotten son of a bitch. And we know that. And we're allowed to know that. He even tells us. He begins by saying something fairly universal. The history of melancholy includes all of us. The history of melancholy includes all of us. That is not a politics of difference. That is a politics of sameness. In this individual struggle, we are all the same. How does he leave us? There is something wrong with me besides melancholia. He's able to say that, yeah, hey, buddy, we're all fucked. Maybe me a little bit more. This is not to say you should pay extra attention to me in my perverseness. It's simply to say, no, I'm wrong. What you read here, these opinions, not kosher, I understand. But hey, I get to have my say. Is it beautiful? Is it lyrical? No, it doesn't have to be. Why would it have to be? What it does is it cuts straight to the core, straight to the kernel of that uniqueness that is universal. The universal part of melancholia and the unique struggle that is to Bukowski. Isn't that what we're here for? Isn't that why you read A. Bukowski? Wouldn't that be why you would read Emily Dickinson? Wouldn't that be why you would read Langston Hughes, Richard Sykin, Byron, anyone? Is for their individual take. For their individual take. You read poetry for the individual. It starts at that level. And for me, a lot of the tension between political and personal comes down to the tension between show and tell. The sort of the writing cliche, show don't tell. That's how you convince an audience, whether it be a single reader or an entire nation, which would be the political level, or hell, even the writer, his or herself, is that you bring the tension down to show, don't tell, and you kick out the telling. You welcome only the showing part. And we're going to go back to literary and thematic. I know it's backwards. I'm sorry about that. Someone, I can't remember who it was, dropped a comment that says that you can, on an Android, flip that to where even recording it would be correct. But I've been toying around and I can't figure it out. I'm not technologically inclined. This is a word that comes to us from page 76 of A Dictionary of Literary and Thematic Terms. DASEIN, a term used by the German philosopher Martin Heidegger to describe the distinctively human way of being in the world. The distinctively human way of being in the world. DASEIN literally means being there. And Heidegger employs it to avoid the notion implicit in terms like self or man of an isolated private entity set off from the objective world. Being there underscores the fact that human consciousness is always situated, always a consciousness of something. The conception forms an important principle of existentialism. In literature, the concept supports the view that the meaning of a literary work emerges from the exchange between reader and text. In the exchange between reader and text, both are DASEIN, both are there, both are individuals. And one's politics, regardless of that class of politic, will fail to be communicated completely effectively, especially through the written word. especially through the written word. How often is it that you get a text from your girlfriend or your boyfriend and they're really pissed off at you, but you read it wrong? Or they're not pissed off at you and you read it wrong. Or you send something and you don't get a reply and you realize, boy, if you read that wrong, it really comes across negatively. So you send a follow-up text. And that's just something simple that you're communicating with someone you care about. What happens when it's political? How do I know when someone says on a piece of paper that anything, all people are created equal? How do I know to take that at face value? How do I know you're not a rotten son of a bitch who does not believe that and you're communicating it in a sarcastic fashion? So I think, for me, a lot of that is that you have to traverse in individual struggles. Because a poem as obviously political as The Soldier by Rupert Brooke, if I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by sons of home. And think, this heart all evil shed away, a pulse in eternal mind no less, gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given. Her sights and sounds dream happy as her day, and laughter learned of friends and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven. It is beautiful, I must admit. If you take it at face value. If you don't take it at face value, boy, that is a pretty scathing poem. That said, even at face value, this poem, so I'm reading this from a book that was a gift. The Penguin Book of First World Poetry. First World War Poetry. First World Poetry. Talking about politics. On the very kissing page to that is a poem called The Mother, which was written after reading Rupert Brooke's sonnet, The Soldier. It is written by May Herschel Clark. So even when you take that poem at face value, it can draw ire. If you should die, think only this of me. In that still quietness where the space is for thought, where parting, loss, and bloodshed shall not be, and men may rest themselves the dream of naught, that in some place a mystic mile away, one whom you loved has drained the bitter cup, till there is naught to drink, has faced the day once more, and now has raised the standard up. And think, my son, with eyes grown clear and dry, she lives as though forever in your sight, loving the things you loved, with heart aglow, for country, honor, truth, traditions high, proud that you paid their price. And if some night her heart should break, well, lad, you will not know. That, to me, reads pretty scathing. Reads a rebuke of the soldier. Now, in a terrible type of irony, Rupert Brooke did die in World War I, leaving behind, obviously, someone who loved him. And if I remember correctly, Rupert Brooke died without seeing battle. He died of infection on a transport ship, I believe. I'm not sure. And that doesn't make it any better or worse. It's just a very painful type of irony. But I think the point I really want to make here, in the struggle against struggle, which is poetry, in the struggle against struggle, which is literature, Your politic has in the struggle against struggle that is literature. Your politic has an opposite. Your struggle has only brothers and sisters. So this poem, The Soldier, when he says, "If I die, think only this of me, that in some foreign field a little corner of Britain lay," that has an opposite where the poem The Mother is saying, hey, I know what you're doing. I know what you're going for there. This hurts me and is going to continue to hurt me until the day I die. But you will never even know. Whereas that poem, The Mother, when you read that poem, anyone, hopefully, well, most people, almost anyone, can read that poem and say, yeah, I got something like that in my life. My son of a bitch brother, he just works all the time, and I never get to see him, and he's struggling for a better life, but mightn't that better life include me? I suppose not. All of these different things that the brother to that struggle, the sister to that struggle, can say in the face of its opposite. That is all I have for this week. Again, there will be a comment from my personal channel linked in the description below, or in the comment section below. And I'm going to start doing the Q&A, Ask Me Anything over there. And if you want to still ask questions, like I say, I think I'm going to turn that into an ongoing series. So go ahead over to that channel, or there's a short video for announcing that here. You could leave a question there. You could leave a question on the announcement on my personal channel, wherever you want to leave it. But yeah, I hope to see you next week for the weekly reader number 6.